This presentation by Neville Moon well, Neville will tell you all about it. I guess that's pointless me doubling up on this, other than to say that Neville spent several years with Cafe Nero as the
head of food and beverage.
Head of food and beverage. So knows his way around a scone or two, I'm sure. And then came to Coupe de Pat 2.5 years ago.
Coming round to you.
And they won't let him go. So whilst he's there, we got him here. And I'd like to introduce you now to Neville Moon. Thank you.
Right, so as well as the presentation today, we've actually got some products for you to try as well. So hopefully you haven't eaten too much today. There's some delicious treats that we've got for you, and we'll bring those out as I go through the presentation. So as Sterling was saying, I'm Neville Moon. I'm Head of Innovation at Coupe de Pat, which hopefully you've seen the stand today, which is 1240. Just over in the corner over there, so please pay a visit to us as well. We'd love to see you. Okay, so I'll start the presentation, and as Sterling was saying, I've worked in innovation in a number of different fields, whether that's in the coffee business, in the bakery business. I've also worked in the ready meals business as well, so I was developing ready meals for Marks and Spencer's and some of the other large supermarkets. So I've worked in innovation in a wide variety of different roles in the UK in different businesses. And I think for me, the key to innovation is knowing what the market's doing and following the trends and watching people and using insights and using instinct to find out, what are the big things that are happening in the market at the moment, and how can I react to those in the menus which I'm putting in my restaurant, in my cafe, or whichever hospitality business you're in. And I'm going to go through that today in quite a lot of detail. So actually, I'm not going to blind anyone with science. Sometimes I can be a bit of a geek when it comes to kind of technology and these sort of things. But I'm actually going to talk today about some of the things which are happening in the UK market and how they can translate into the menu, and also how Coupe de Pat can help you to form that menu as well. Okay, so why is innovation important to my menu, and what difference can it make? So it's really, the main thing really is keeping that menu refreshed, because if you have regular customers, and that's ideally what we will be having, a lot of very regular customers and great people that we know, they're always looking for something different. I always tend to find from working in the restaurant business is that your regular customers will tend to choose the same things, but they really like to see new things on the menu as well. They like to have that interest in there. They like to have those things which catch the eye. Even if they actually go back to their old favourites, they still love to see new things in there. So I think it's really important to introduce new things to add that colour, so that the menu isn't simply black and white. It has a lot of colour and a lot of diversity. I think it's also, it's a very competitive marketplace. I'm sure you know as well that you have competitors all around you after your customers, and you're really looking for those points of difference between your establishment and theirs in terms of what you offer. And I think that establishing key points of difference is a golden rule when it comes to menu development. And I think the key thing, as I was talking about at the start, is understanding what's happening in the market at the moment and reacting to that. Everybody in the UK in the last 20 years we've become a real nation of foodies. So we sort of started with Mortarelli bringing across the potato about 500-600 years ago, and we've all got really, really into food, and TV programmes like Great British Bake Off, for example, now command an audience that football matches used to command. So in terms of that, the innovation and refreshment and so on is right at the top of the agenda. So we're going to just do a little tasting first of all of a couple of products which we have on our stand at the show. The first one is macaroon shell. So this is an example of a product which what we provide is the actual shell here, and therefore you can use it as a base to make your own macaroon. So rather than buying a macaroon which is ready filled, ready topped and ready prepared, you can actually buy this to create your own version. Could even be unique to your restaurant or cafe or establishment, and that's where the macaroon shell comes in. So we've actually got a couple of our chefs at the back here who are going to start handing those around. The other one which I've got for you to taste as well is a mini chocolate eclair, which comes from our Sweet Petit Four collection. And again, minis, fantastic way of eating in small quantities, great way of showing off real skill, fantastic particularly for afternoon tea. Afternoon tea is a growing trend in the UK, as I'm sure you're aware, and these mini eclairs fit very nicely into that, as well as the traditional British products. So by all means, try some of these as they come round. So in terms of innovation at Coup de Pâte and how it happens, we've actually got a team of 21 chefs in Paris. So we have a large central kitchen in Paris. A number of those guys have worked in top restaurants around the world and top hotels around the world. Each one of them has a speciality as well, so that be patisserie, bread making. Some of those guys are actually chocolatiers, so they have all the equipment they need to produce the best products in the world. And what they do is they actually come up with new ideas with that equipment, and they take them to specialist producers. So I wouldn't call these factories as such. These are large-scale bakeries or small artisans that set up in France. And what the guys look for when they developed their idea in Paris is someone who's the best at making the idea, not simply one who can make the idea. And there's an important distinction there, because they're real specialists and they really, they want to create the same product which is produced in the small kitchen in Paris and scale it up to something which can be used across France and across the UK. So what we have then is, once we've developed all of our new products, we put it into a 6 monthly catalogue. So the catalogues actually are refreshed very often. So we don't have a yearly catalogue or a 2-yearly catalogue. We actually bring out a new catalogue every 6 months now. So there's a lot of NPD in there, a lot of innovation. A bit like I was saying about the menu, a lot of refreshment in there as well. Some great new products. Each new product is featured on the first 2 pages of each section. And if you come along to our stand, you'll actually see some catalogues there that you can pick up and have a look through some of the products which we've developed. And the other thing we do as well as a business is we invest very heavily in market insights and market information. I would say that our development is very much a combination of insights as well as instinct. So the insights that we buy allow us to see what's happening in the general market, but also we have a great deal of instinct in terms of what we know to be happening in our own market in the UK and how we can react to that. So what the key trends that are really driving UK innovation at the moment are very varied, and I'll work through each one of these in turn so that we can understand what are the big things that are happening in the UK at the moment. So the first one really, particularly in terms of bakery, is our hybrid products. So we've no doubt heard about the cronut, which had a lot of press. So the cronut is a combination of a croissant and a donut. Starbucks, of which there's one just outside here, brought out a muffin called a duffin. So it's a donut and a muffin combined together. And I think what's interesting here, and hasn't been really allowed in previous years, is that people have been accepting of these sort of clones or hybrids of food in a way that they haven't been accepting of it before. And we're tending to find a lot of these coming out. Hence our Struffin actually is a version of an Austrian cake, which we've made into a small muffin. And it sounds like a lot of kind of huffing and puffing about a Struffin and a duffin, but it is actually a key trend which people are now looking for. They're looking for that interest. And social media, particularly in the case of the Corona, which was particularly driven by social media, because as soon as someone's tasting something, they're onto their smartphone, they're tweeting it to their friends and those that follow them. And before you know it, quite a small idea, if it's got enough interest behind it, can spread incredibly rapidly. And now it can spread incredibly rapidly around the world as well. So that's a key trend. Hybrids are a key trend that's happening at the moment. So that was the almond Struffin, which is actually coming around now. So it's a small version. It's a combination of an Austrian streusel with a muffin. So the next big thing as well is instinct. And by instinct, we mean all the there's a massive growth at the moment in terms of farmers markets and street food in particular. And what those guys do is they focus on 1 or 2 things, and they do them really, really well. So they don't try and bring out a huge menu, they just focus it down to one or two really, really great things. And a lot of it is very much, and I'm sure we've seen this when we've seen street foods and we've been to food markets, is very kind of instinct based as well. You know, it's about the best burgers, so really meaty burgers. It's about great cuts of meat. It's about cooking those things correctly as well, so that the textures are perfect. And so it's really about sort of saying, I don't sell 50 different things, I sell one thing that I do really well. And it's a very strong proposition for any restaurant or cafe to have one thing which they're known for and people come to them for and say, but you know what? They do the best burger that I've tasted in this area, and people will actually come to the establishment on that basis. And here's just a few photos of some of the street food outlets and that we've seen recently. And Curb is a street food market which is based in London, near Hoxton. We've also got a huge growth as well in terms of rock festivals. Rock festivals are leading the way in food as well in terms of what people are eating. When you went to rock festivals in the past, it was more sort of burgers, fries and hot dogs. And now you can get some really great gourmet food, some fantastic Mexican food, Thai food, Vietnamese food. They've almost become little mini food festivals as well as music festivals. And it's interesting how some great new restaurants are cropping up now, based on the fact that they had a fantastic street food concept or music concept. There's a restaurant in London called Pizza Pilgrims, for example, where those guys built their own wood-fired oven out of a few old steel drums with some scrap wood from pallets and so on, and become so well known for having great pizzas. They've now got a restaurant in the centre of London. So I think some of these trends that we see, these street food guys, and it's worth going to either a street food festival or a music festival or a great food market to pick up inspiration as well, see what's happening there, see what people are looking at there, because they're really grabbing consumers' attentions, and that can really affect your menu in terms of the way that you describe your food, in terms of the way that you serve your food, in terms of your promotions as well. And perhaps even think about, one of the other things we've noticed now is the reverse of the situation, where great restaurants are actually buying old Airstream caravans, old vans, old ice cream vans, and actually going from restaurant to street food. So as well as from street food to restaurant, it's going from restaurant to street food as well. And that could be an opportunity for some of the restaurants here in the audience today who think, well, actually, if I took my food to the streets, it would have two things. One, I would sell a lot of it by focusing on one thing, but secondly, it would actually bring people back into my restaurant as well. So it's a great promotion of my establishment. The next one I'd like to focus on is very different in terms of natural food. So the top restaurant in the world, or the restaurant which is regarded as the top restaurant in the world at the moment, is called Noma in Copenhagen, and that's all very much about natural food, about that natural way of eating, ingredients not really sort of playing around too much, but keeping those ingredients fresh, keeping them as if they've just been freshly picked, and that's a key influence as well in terms of how that's coming across into the UK. It fits very much into the one below it as well, conscience, which is people shopping for food which has been farmed correctly, where they know the origin of the food, where they can associate themselves with the fact that that was a farm that they maybe passed as they were driving around the other day, and local establishments such as that really stick in people's minds. And you see a lot of that in menus now, where people are actually saying, our salads are from Secret's Farm, or our meat is from Laverstoke, for example, and using that as a way of really drawing people in and bringing people in, and that connection with the local community is very important. And that fits into heritage, provenance, and conscience that way. The other thing as well that we're noticing as well is that a lot of people are now growing their own food at home. Now, whether that's on a very small scale, for example, you can do that through a selection of window planters or hanging baskets, or whether you've actually sort of created a little raised bed in the back garden. And the key difference that that's making in terms of how people are eating is they're becoming much more aware of food which is in season. So we've had quite a few confusing years over the last 10 years or so where people haven't really been that sure when a food is in season, when it's out of season. By growing food more at home, people are realising, well, this is in season because I grew that last year, and that's when it came out of the ground, and this is when it should be eaten. And there's a far greater awareness now of how those foods, when those foods are ready to pick, when they're ready to eat. And that's having an influence on menus, because that means that menus have to be far more seasonally aware. So when the menu's in spring or summer or winter, it needs to reflect what's in season at that time. And people will sort of be turned off by certain ingredients that they would associate with summer, but served in winter. And that's a trend which is starting to appear. And health and well-being is another key trend as well. And it's very difficult actually to deliver great tasting healthy products. And in a lot of occasions, what you tend to find on menus is that the healthy products in there is used as a way of kind of lifting the menu and making the menu more interesting. And people they like to see it there, but they don't tend to choose it. Now that whole situation, I think, is now turning around, and people are buying more healthy foods now. They're actively going for more healthy foods. And it also fits into this trend as well of products like, menu items like gluten-free or wheat-free. And that's a really big trend at the moment. And I think it's an unusual one, because very few people actually have a gluten intolerance. But a lot of people are looking to reduce wheat in their diet to avoid that kind of bloating feeling. The doctors have said to them, you need to reduce wheat, and therefore they're actually going out there and doing it. And I think any item that we've looked at recently, which is either gluten-free or wheat-free, has really flown off the menu and has done very well. So that's a key trend to look at. So really, as a collection together, these summarise all those key trends which are happening in the UK at the moment and can be reflected in menus. And I think if you get a reflection of that menu, know that people will associate that, they'll see that you're being inclusive, that everybody that comes to the restaurant has got a choice, and will feel comfortable in that establishment as well in terms of what they're eating. Now, I suppose the next thing to go on to is actually, it's about time, I think, afternoon tea. So we've got some more products for you to try, because in Heritage, afternoon tea has been a major growth. And it's fantastic for a hotel or a restaurant, because what it really does is it fills that gap in the afternoon. So the gap where things are generally a bit quiet, so after lunch and before supper, particularly that kind of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock time, is a great time to drive more revenue and drive more growth by offering afternoon tea. In our last catalogue, we've launched a lot of new afternoon tea products to react to that, and we've got a couple for you to taste today. So there's a mini Victoria sandwich cake and a lemon drizzle cake, which are now coming round, if you'd like to try some of those. But I think that's Heritage again, really showing itself on UK menus in terms of why people are choosing it and creating revenue in those usually kind of quiet times. Okay, so we enjoy those. So as well as talking about the what's happening in the UK market in general, I'd also like to talk about what's happening in bakery as well. Bakeries, we've had a real renaissance in bakery in the UK in the last few years, mainly driven by Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood. So they've done us a great favour in terms of the Great British Bake Off. And what that's really driven is people's awareness of just how difficult it is to make bakery products and pastry and bakery items. I think before we sort of traditionally thought, well, we'd lost the art of baking a little bit, and we've forgotten just how difficult it is to make some of these things. So I think by watching people making or preparing choux pastry and seeing the kind of mistakes that happen and seeing how difficult it is, it's really raised awareness of just how good some of those traditional pastries and bakery can be. And patisserie is a particularly good example of that. So we've seen a huge growth in patisserie Valerie stores around the UK. So 15 years ago, there was 2 patisserie Valerie stores in London, which had been there for about 80 years. And by the end of next year, there will be 220 patisserie Valerie stores right across the UK. But that's actually a serious threat in terms of the coffee business, because those guys are selling a lot of coffee. So whereas we've traditionally seen Starbucks and Nero and Costa on the high street, we'll actually start to see a lot more patisserie Valerie. Now that will mean that people become much more aware of really good patisserie. It will become a much more prominent item on the menu, and it'll be seen as a real luxury good. And I think that will drive itself in terms of desserts on menus and so on, and what's served in afternoon teas. And here's just a few of the products which we have in the catalogue at the moment. And to take you through some of these, the first one is called Paris-Brest, which is actually named after a cycle race from Paris to the tip of Brittany. And it's made from 2 bicycle wheels of choux pastry filled with a hazelnut praline in the centre, and a really delicious, proper piece of French patisserie. The next one is the eclair, which the eclair in the UK became a sort of fresh cream cake with a chocolate topping and often a fresh cream filling, or sometimes a not so fresh cream filling. And the real French patisserie is actually filled with a chocolate ganache. So again, that's something which we say in our current catalogue is a real French eclair with a really nice dark chocolate ganache inside, like a version of the small one that you tried earlier. And we also have a coffee eclair in the range as well, which is filled with a coffee cream. And again, that's a classic piece of French patisserie, a choux pastry. Actually, the tartlets, which we have as well in our catalogue, again show an incredible amount of skill in terms of French patisserie skills. So again, we've got our 21 chefs in France preparing all of these products to the correct recipes, and doing all their many years of training and putting those into their products. And they're produced from a pastry called pâte sucrée, which is a pastry which is only made from flour and butter and salt and sugar and an awful lot of skill. It's that lovely sort of biscuity pastries when you crunch into it. And this isn't actually, this is a good example of where tradition becomes innovation, because the chocolate tart here is actually not your traditional chocolate tart. It's a very, very chocolatey one. It's actually got a layer of 2 layers of chocolate on the base, a chocolate mirror on top. It's actually topped with real gold leaf, so a really premium product. And you can see the way that people are, attracted to it. Gold leaf has been used on British Bake Off. It's been used on a lot of TV programs recently. Just that little bit of gold leaf costs quite a lot of money, that the little bit of gold leaf, but what it does add is an incredible amount of value. So a little piece of it actually doesn't really cost much at all. It's the sheets of it will cost a lot of money, but by adding that little bit, just adds all that value onto the product and really wows customers with both with the taste and the appearance. And then another real classic is opera as well, which they actually made on British Bake Off in the last series, and it's a proper kind of classic French piece of patisserie with lots of layers of different types of chocolate ganache and coffee cream, a little bit like a French tiramisu, and it's named after the Paris Opera House because of the number of layers of seats in the opera house, and that's where opera comes from. So these are just some of the products which you can see on our stand as well and taste them, as well as in the catalogue. The other big trend as well in bakery as well is that people are becoming much more aware of authenticity and speciality. So becoming much more aware of the fact that a croissant isn't really simply a croissant. It's a pastry which has been formed into a multitude of different layers. In fact, in this case, there's actually 36 individual layers of pastry in a croissant, and that's because it's been very, very carefully folded. If you've made croissant in your kitchens or at home, you'll know it's a very laborious process of folding over the dough, turning the dough round, rolling out, letting it rest, proving it, folding over again, rolling out, letting it rest, proving it. So it takes ages to make really good croissant dough, and therefore that's where we come in. We actually have bakeries which are specialists at making proper croissant dough with lots of layers inside, so you get that lovely kind of feathery texture and that buttery taste. We've also got a range of products which are made from beurre de Signy pastry, beurre de Signy butter as well. And beurre de Signy is a very, very small region in Normandy, which the butter which is produced there, or the cows that produce the butter there, have to come from that area. And it's a very small area, so it's not a sort of mass market butter by any means. Only a certain number of pastries can actually be made from that butter. And it's got the difference between that butter and UK butter is that UK butter is churned, so that it's very creamy, and it actually gives that kind of almost like creamy sort of sticky taste almost to it. Whereas Berdisigny butter is actually made in a similar way to cheese, where you add a starter into the butter and that separates out the curds and whey. And that gives it a very, very slightly acidic taste, but a very, very different taste to UK butter. And when you try those products made with Berdisigny butter, you'll really tell the difference between the British butter and the French butter. But this is how specialist as well bakery is becoming. So it's not simply a croissant. Sounds a bit like the old M&S advert, you know, not just a croissant, but it's a Berdisigny croissant, and it has a different taste and something which your customers will really notice. There's also, as I was saying there, the real element of making great croissant dough is that patience that's required as well. So again, if making croissant dough in the kitchens or at home is a very laborious process. And actually the pastries which we're looking at now, and the base pastry and the croissant dough, is just made from very simple ingredients. So flour, butter, a small amount of salt, some yeast, and nothing else, other than an awful lot of technique and an awful lot of time. So the next big and the final big growth actually in bakery at the moment is in really, really great bread. And it's fantastic for someone who, I've been involved in bakery for a number of years, and having tasted some fantastic breads all around the world, it's great to see those now landing on our shores in the UK. But also a great way of starting a meal in a restaurant. As Michael Caine famously said, the first impression of your restaurant is the bread that, sorry, I'm standing in the way of my slides, is the bread which is served in the restaurant. So customers will look at the first impression they have when they start their meal is how good is the bread, and that will really form their opinion of the rest of the meal. And also the great thing about bread as well is it can be formed into very, very simple but delicious starters. So just by having a great bread with some dipping oil and some olives, it's a fantastic starter for a meal. It's, in terms of time of preparation, it's very short. And we've reacted to that by bringing out a lot of bread. So we've got a wide range of speciality breads now, with olive inclusions, herb inclusions. We've got real sourdoughs as well. It's great to see naturally fermented breads in the UK. So 10 years ago again, we were using baker's yeast, and now we're actually using starters. We're making our own levain or natural yeast from the flour itself. So instead of buying baker's yeast, the yeast in these breads is actually made by taking the natural yeast which is present on the flour and using that to raise the breads. And that gives the breads a very different texture, gives it a great flavour, and people, you know, we're now seeing sourdough in particular being used on a lot of menus, and as a real way of showing quality and showing real foodiness as well. And so bread is, you know, a great way to start a meal, and we'll definitely get the diners off to a great start in terms of whetting their taste buds and thinking about what will be the next thing that I'm going to try in the restaurant. So great first impression. And also the other great thing about bread as well is in comparison to other traditional starters and things, it's actually a healthy alternative as well. Sourdoughs don't actually need a lot of salt because the sour in there is a kind of natural flavour in there rather than using salt, and don't need a lot of other flavours in there. So actually, by serving bread with olive oil and with dipping oils, again, those are fats which are healthier fats than we've traditionally used in Britain, and therefore, as well as having a bread which gives you a great first impression when you open the menu and have your first dish, it's also something which you can offer as a healthy alternative in there as well. It helps increase the sales. But I think above all, I think we walk into a really great restaurant, and whereas you used to look at the desserts trolley, maybe in the 1980s, maybe I'm a bit too old now, but looking at the desserts trolley, when you used to look at the cheese board or the cheese trolley, I think people now when they walk into a restaurant, if they see a great display of breads, and sometimes these breads will actually see them, you know, get a bit of theatre in there in terms of watching the chefs or even the waiters in the restaurant cutting that bread on big wooden boards. Gives a fantastic impression of that restaurant, that it's really foodie, selling some great natural products, and you know, a great taste of things to come when they choose from the rest of the menu. So to summarise, I think I've taken you through today the key trends that are happening in the UK at the moment in terms of food. So the key things that people are looking for, and also focusing on bakery in particular, to show what's really happening in bakery and how we can enhance our menus and can add value to our restaurants by choosing the right bakery items.